welcome back to another episode of our mini podcast, I Built a Company That Makes a Difference by B1, where we talk to founders of sustainable businesses to get their takes on how and why they started their companies and the lessons that they have learned along the way. Today, I'm sitting down with Becky Boulogne, the founder of Boshi Botanicals, which is based in Memphis, Tennessee. Boshi Botanicals creates and sells artisanal goods that are natural, original, and organic, and they are the first zero waste refillery in all of Memphis. So, from my vantage point, and that is an American based in London, Memphis isn't necessarily considered to be big in environmental sustainability, but in this conversation, we'll hear from Becky that maybe is a huge misnomer, or it perhaps is correct. So, Becky, very good to have you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amber. I'm excited to be here. And yeah, your impression of Memphis isn't exactly wrong, but there is a big community of people who are trying to make a difference. So Boshi Botanicals, my company, I started making soaps back in 2021. It was actually a response to going through breast cancer treatment during the pandemic. So in addition to having small children, being a breast cancer survivor has made me very mindful of how what we do with our earth, what we do with our bodies, all plays a big role together. So I was already a big proponent of sustainability and, tried to do things here and there, but I would say my effort wasn't as big until I went through that personal experience. But then your brain starts going and you're thinking, gosh, what is it? I was 38 years old. What did I do wrong? And of course, nobody can ever tell me that. So then I'm like, okay, well, what are the things that I can control? And then you start going down that rabbit hole and you start thinking about, oh my gosh, what about the plastics? What about the fragrance oils? What about, this and that and the food that we eat? So, yeah, that really sparked a deeper journey into sustainability and trying to think about, what can I do to keep myself healthy, but also to hopefully prevent my kids from having to go through the same thing. So fast forward to this past November, I had been making soaps and doing the art shows, and all of my soaps are made with organic oils and butters. I never use fragrance oils in any of the products that I use. And I've always done it with a mind for sustainability. So I try to use products and ingredients that I know are more sustainable. I stay away from palm oils. I never use plastic packaging. So when it came to opening a store in November, it was just a natural transition to say, okay, I know I can't personally fill a whole store with my own products. So what else can I do? And I looked around and I said, gosh, Memphis doesn't have a zero waste refill store. So why not? Why not be the first? And it's definitely scary. We've only been in Memphis for 2 years. So trying to get the lay of the land and think about, are people actually going to be receptive to this type of movement? And we've actually been really pleasantly surprised. There's a lot of education to do, but we're partnering with organizations like Clean Memphis, like the Tennessee Environmental Council, and together we're trying to help amplify each other's messages and get out the fact that there are things that you can do. And it doesn't have to be perfection. It just has to be baby steps. But yeah, there's a movement that is starting to take hold in Memphis. And I'm excited to be at the forefront of that.
Wow. So, that's wow. So let me just recap the first
Yeah.
part of that. You were living through the pandemic with small kids, and
Yep.
you were undergoing breast cancer treatment at the same time.
Yeah. And we had actually been living in the Philippines when the pandemic hit. So we were forced to repatriate to a brand new state. And that's where I got treatment. So it was
Oh
just
my,
all the things all at once.
all of the things all at once,
All of the
and an
things.
international move. Holy
Mhm.
moly. And so you
Yeah.
started making soap
Mhm.
during this period of absolute chaos.
Yeah.
So you were making soaps and selling them at fairs. Did you have an
Mhm.
e-commerce presence?
I had a website, a very
Okay.
bad website, but I had a website.
Okay, so you're selling them online and at fairs and farmers markets, things like that. And then last
Yeah.
November, you opened an actual brick and mortar store
Yes, that's
that
correct.
it's more than what your soaps that you're making, it's a refillery as well.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
this is you are a first to mark, you're the first refillery. You have like all the education to do. What has been the community's response? Do people wander in and they're like, what is this? Or they're like, I've come from across town because I heard that you were
Yeah.
here, that you opened. What's been the community's response?
Yeah. So it's actually been really multifaceted. You have people who knew us from art shows and they were already following us. They were already super excited. Hey, look, used to be, I have to find you at an art show to buy your stuff, or I'd have to buy it online, but now I can actually come in and I can, smell all of your new products and get that. So we had that level of excitement from people who were already loyal customers. And then we have people who, as we're getting the word out about being the first zero waste refill store, who have lived in other places or been to other places that have zero waste refill stores. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm so glad that Memphis finally has one. And then you have the last group of people who are the people who maybe sustainability is not really their thing. Maybe thinking about that is not really their thing. So when those people come in, there are some that their eyes light up and they're like, wow, like this is, I've never even heard of this type of concept. And they get excited about it and they start exploring and they're like, okay, this is really cool. I'm going to bring back my jars. And then the last group of people are the people who you start talking about sustainability and their eyes just gloss over. And you're like, it's okay. Like we try to meet everybody where they are in their journey.
And how would you, so you're not from Memphis.
No.
Okay. How I think I've been to Memphis maybe twice in my life. How, and not for many, many decades. How do you describe Memphis for somebody who's never been there? How do you talk about, and it's, of course, it's a whole city, it's not homogenous, but what were your impressions when you moved there and as you were building this store and building your
Yeah,
product?
it's interesting. So it's definitely complicated to say the least. Memphis definitely has a lot of issues that need some work. It's a city where there's a lot of crime. It was actually, I think, named one of the most dangerous cities to drive in recently. Um, so, there's a lot of grittiness. There's a lot of division still in the city. I think to me, it was really shocking to come into a city where the neighborhoods are, people say that, if you live in a neighborhood, you don't necessarily go to this other neighborhood. So, I mean, that's been a big challenge because where my store is located, it's like, people from another neighborhood may not come over to the store because that's not in their neighborhood. So, like, that was really shocking to find out. My husband and I met in Atlanta before we started moving around the world. And like in Atlanta, you always go to other neighborhoods. You're like, oh, what's happening in Decatur this weekend? What's happening in Midtown? But it's not necessarily the same here. So that's been a big shock. And we're also vegan. So like we're in a city where people eat lots and lots and lots of meat.
Hmm.
So that's been very different. So like the whole idea of coming in, I mean, we're already extremely different from most of the people here. A lot of people have lived here all their lives. Again, it's a big meat city. It's heart of the Bible Belt. So when you come in and you're a little bit different, it can definitely be a challenge to try to figure out, okay, like how do you get the word out and help people understand that, like it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be, you're not going to come in and get judged or shamed just because you're not doing all the things. But going back to the question about describing Memphis, I think that there's a lot of heart here. People care a lot. Every place that we've lived, there's always been something different and special about that place. And I have to say, for Memphis, it's the people. Like they see hardship, they see crime, they see, craziness going on, but yet they come out and they support and they, get excited and they rally around each other. So that's been one of the best things about living here.
So that's super interesting, but also really nice to hear. I lived in Atlanta. I'm from Colorado. I lived in Atlanta for a little bit. And so I was going to ask you, is it because I'm not from the South or like
Yeah.
anywhere in this region that part of the country is so different for me. I was going to ask,
Yeah.
is it something like Atlanta, but it seems like it's not. So people have very localized shopping patterns, which that is something that's super interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that either for any
Mhm.
American city. I would have guessed that more for cities where you don't have cars, like New York,
Right.
for example, where you just
Mhm.
not everybody has a car, or it's like really expensive to have a car. So shopping locally is the thing that you do
Mhm.
based on convenience, like what is between your subway stop and your house, your apartment. But that's really
Yeah.
interesting for Memphis. How did you find it then, opening up a brick and mortar store? And as you said, you're kind of
Uh-huh.
outside of a lot of communities. You're vegan. You've lived abroad. You're you're doing things that are about environmental sustainability. So you're outside of a lot of traditional Memphis communities. How did you how did you do your research and decide to, okay, I'm going to now open a store that's reliant on community?
Yeah. Um, so I think a lot of that goes back to the experience with breast cancer and saying, I'm not going to be afraid, like I know it's different. And like ever since we've repatriated, it's like we know we're different. Like it's hard to repatriate and fit back in entirely. You can't, like you've been
No, you really
changed.
can't.
So
Yes.
it's like you can either, fight against that or you can embrace it and say, okay, I'm just going to put myself out there and I'm going to see what happens. And that's kind of where it went. It was like, like having lived overseas, the first place I ever saw a refill store was when we lived in France. And it was amazing. You could go down and you could refill on beans and oats and cleaning products and stuff like that. So it was amazing. And like, that whole concept just sort of changed how I thought about things. And it's not like you couldn't get bulk in the US before that, but I had never seen something so holistic where there were so many different options that you could refill on. And then when we lived in the Philippines, Southeast Asia has a hard time with trash, right? So like there's a lot of trash that comes in from other countries, and just the way that like a lot of the foods, we have a lot of prepackaged foods in plastic here, but literally there'd be like individual apples wrapped in plastic, like the plastic is a huge issue there. And yet there was a community of people who, I guess similar to what we're doing in Memphis, they were like, we're going to change this, so it was a place where I first saw bamboo straws and a lot of efforts to try to get people to think and use more sustainable products, like, so there were restaurants where they were like, we're not using any plastic straws. And maybe that seems small, but it's a big deal in a country that deals with a lot of plastic trash. So, similarly in Memphis, it's like, okay, there is a lot of education. But if we can get in front of the right groups and if we can work with the right partners, then together we can amplify the message and hopefully make a difference.
That's amazing. Where else have you lived? France, the Philippines? Where else have you guys lived?
Germany, Mexico, China, and then we've lived in multiple cities in the US. So we've lived in Portland, which is obviously a very, a sustainably driven city. We've lived in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is probably the opposite of that. Like I said, we met in Atlanta. I'm originally from Ohio. My husband's from Connecticut. And then we lived in Arizona during the pandemic. So we've lived
Wow.
all over the place.
Holy moly. Okay. So then let's go back to finding and setting
Mhm.
up your store. So you already had one
Mhm.
product. How long, if we work backwards from like the launch date, when did you start saying, I need a store? Like this is an idea that I want to pursue. And then what were the big milestones along the way? Obviously finding a location, getting it
Mhm.
refitted, zoning, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
What were the other milestones? When did you decide to say, or maybe from the conception, this is going to be a refillery? What were
Mhm.
some, working backwards from your November launch, what was the process?
Yeah. So, like we do anything, my husband and I, so we did a pop-up in the same mall. It's a mall where our store is, but it's a different type of mall. Like it was designed to look like an indoor outdoor mall. So if you walk down the hallways, it was built in 1976 for the bicentennial to look like a 1776 village. So it has a very like unique European type feel when you're inside of it. So we did a pop-up there in July, and looking around the mall, I was like, I had not really considered doing a store before that, but then looking around the mall, I was like, wow, I could see this being a place where we could actually set up a store. The Each of the stores have a downstairs and an upstairs, so that gives me an opportunity to have a workshop upstairs. So that's where I
Mhm.
do all the making. I was able to take it out of my home and move it to the upstairs of the store. And with it being an indoor outdoor mall and having an entrance that opens to the interior of the mall and it being small enough, I felt like, okay, this is a safe place for myself and my kids where, if they have to be here because they're off school or whatever, then I know they're not just going to run out into the parking lot. They can go into the mall and they can still walk around and, and everybody knows who they are. So like it feels extremely safe. And then just feeling it felt a little bit more like what we had grown accustomed to living overseas. So, yeah, I mean, the repatriation is like a hard thing because it's like you get used to the excitement and the beauty and, and then you come back to the US and you're missing something. So like helping fill that hole in our hearts where we're missing some of the, the beautiful architecture and things like that. So it gives us a little bit of that feel. There's actually a French bakery at the very front of the mall, and like all the shops in there are like artisan shops. So it just feels a little bit closer to what we had grown accustomed to and what we really loved. So that was in July, and we said, okay, can we do this? Can we not? And we went back and forth, back and forth. All right, do we want to? Do we not? Do we want to? Do we not? And then like, how do we fund it? So we decided to self-fund it. We used 401k loans, and we said, okay, we want to pay ourselves back. If we're paying interest, we want that interest to go to us. So we self-funded it, and we built it out. The space when we got in there hadn't been used in, I want to say 3 years.
Oh, wow. So it was
So,
just
it
vacant.
was just vacant. It was in need of, some definite updates, but thankfully not too much. So we definitely had to repaint. There were some walls that were covered in like this black pleather for some reason. So we had to tear all that
Walls,
down.
walls based it. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because we wanted it to feel light and airy and clean and just, like our brand, which is just very clean, very simple, very natural. So we painted it, we brought in shelving. There was actually a local store that was going out of business, and they had a lot of furniture. So we went and we purchased a lot of the furniture
Oh, great.
for our store from that store that was going out of business. So we signed our lease in the beginning of September, and then we had 2 months for the build out. During that time, we were also doing art shows. So it was like build the store out plus do these big art shows. And somehow we pulled it all together before November 1st, and we were able to open on November 1st.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So there was a bit of refitting to be done.
Mhm.
Scramble, scramble, as there always is. A lot of
Mhm.
excitement, probably a lot of like cursing and a couple moments of like, why
Oh,
the heck did we
absolutely.
decide to do this? This is a disaster.
Absolutely. All that.
Pushing through launch day,
Mhm.
fantastic. And then, so it's been like, what, 4 months? It's not been very long.
No, it hasn't.
How has it gone?
It's going really well. We actually did a ribbon cutting ceremony with the Memphis Chamber last Thursday. So when we opened, we just kind of rushed and got the doors open. We said, okay, we want to be open for the holidays so that we can start getting that foot traffic and letting people know we're here. And then in January, we took a step back and we said, okay, now what can we do to really get the word out to people who may not otherwise come out this way? So we did that. We've started offering workshops so that people can come in and they can learn about creating their own natural bath and body products. And we're doing partnerships with organizations like Clean Memphis, where we're going to pop up at a sustainability fair that they're doing. And the Tennessee Environmental Council, we're cross promoting each other for. They're doing a recycling event, a couple of local recycling events for hard to recycle items. So those are some things that we've done to try to help get the word out. And yeah, I mean, it's slow and steady. It's a roller coaster. I'm sure anybody who opens a store or any kind of business would say that, there's some days where we're riding a high. We're like, this is awesome. And then there's other days we're like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? But I would say that if you look at the overall, it's been really good. And we actually hired our first employee. So
That's
first
a
two
big
employees.
milestone. That's a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
milestone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
it's
mean,
exciting.
day to day, as you said, it's like day to day, hour to hour, and there's so much. What
Mhm.
are we doing? Oh, but now
Yeah.
this is great, and we can forecast it. I can project myself in the future, and then
Mhm.
something else happens. It really is like an hour by hour journey and
Oh, it is.
adventure.
It is.
That's awesome. Can you talk about a little bit about, now you have a brick and mortar store, which a lot of our audience aspires to have. Not, we have a lot of
Mhm.
e-commerce businesses, business owners, but also a lot of folks who have brick and mortar stores or are hoping someday to do the transition that you did.
Mhm.
What are a couple things that you would do differently now?
Mhm.
In hindsight, what would you have done differently or planned differently or just,
Uh-huh.
avoid it altogether?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we opened up in time for the holidays, and I was super concerned with, okay, we have to get products like the Swedish dishcloths that have the Christmas prints on them, or, like little items like that, that were specifically holiday geared. Plantable seed cards. We carry plantable seed cards. And I was like, okay, we have to have enough plantable seed cards so that everybody can send plantable seed cards for the holidays. So I think I would have taken a step back and said, okay, we can have a few of these items, but we don't have to do all the things. it doesn't, just because you're opening for the holidays doesn't mean you have to have all the holiday things. So that was definitely a learning experience. And going into the next holidays, I'm like, okay, I may get one or two specialty things, or make a soap that's special for that, or make a bath salt that's special for that. But in general, I think just taking a deep breath and focusing on what are the core values of the store and what are the core products that we want to carry, rather than, the one-off, like, oh, this is great for the holidays, because that's not really our purpose anyway. We want people to be making choices, mindful choices that have them consuming less, but buying higher quality products that will last longer for them, and at the end of their life cycle can be composted or reused. You can bring it back in to refill it, things like that. So I think that's one thing that I would have done. I think another thing is look for more help. We decided we would do everything on our own, and
When you
it
say
saved
everything, what does
money.
that encompass?
So the build out, the public relations, the marketing, the website, and we're trying to do all these things all at once. We rolled over to a new point of sale system, which meant we had to change our website, which meant, and then trying to do the press release and get media to cover, and doing the build out at the same time while juggling kids who are in school. And it was just a lot. And, living in a city where we don't have family local, we have community, but it's always hard to go and say, hey, can you watch my kids for a couple of hours? Even if your friends really don't mind at all, it's a really hard thing to step outside of yourself and say, hey, community, can you wrap around me? And so, like, when people offered, we definitely took that, but I think I would do more asking and say, hey, do you have a couple hours? Do you mind, watching the kids, or do you mind helping us move this furniture or that, rather than feeling like, okay, we made this decision together. Now it's just going to be my husband and me,
We've
just,
got to suffer through it alone.
suffer through it alone, and, like, yeah. And stress over it and say, okay, everything has to be perfect. Everything has to be ready. And it really didn't have to be. It just felt like it needed to be. Cause I think, we opened the store and it was in a great place. And, like, you have to, for anybody who's looking at opening a retail store, you have to give yourself some grace and say, you know what, not everything's going to be exactly the way I want it. And that's okay. It's like being in theater. People don't know if you miss a line. People don't know if, like, you walked the wrong side of the stage. It's just, it's a performance. And if you put it on well enough, nobody's going to know the little things that are not necessarily going right.
So that is such a good point, especially about, I mean, I guess more people than are willing to admit it are perfectionists, or some, on some sort of scale of perfectionism.
Yeah.
And that's such a good point about things not being perfect. And you have to be okay with that, because you have to keep going forward. And you can't have a
Yeah.
meltdown because something didn't, or you can have a small little meltdown and then keep it
Mhm.
moving. And the ultimate person who would decide whether this is a disaster or not is your customers. And
Exactly.
so there's been so many things for myself starting, different ventures, that I think, oh my, I cannot, I simply cannot launch this feature or this product or this whatever or this event unless this
Mhm.
is exactly right. And
Yeah.
that never, so letting go of that idea, ooh,
Mhm.
that's been like, a lot of unpacking.
Yeah.
Just to get to that point where you can still breathe through. This is not, the vision is there, but this is not the way that I dreamt this. This is not what my
Mhm.
vision board says. This is not how I, wrote the plans down exactly. And being
Yeah.
okay with moving forward with that and not dwelling on it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely easier said than done. And it definitely takes some mindfulness. And I'm still not there. Like, there's definitely still days where I'm like, oh, this didn't go the way I wanted, or oh, and then it's like, but if you step back and you think about it, nobody else knows that but me. And
Right.
I think that people, especially when you're a small business, when you're locally owned, people are a lot more forgiving than, if you're like a big box store, then, I think people can appreciate small business and family owned businesses and women owned businesses. And they say, okay, like, yeah, there's things that are going to go wrong. And as long as you're honest about it, as long as you're kind about it, I think that people are willing to be forgiving. And then there was one other thing. So there's a woman who's also in the mall, and she's been my mentor. And she said, when you're stocking your store, people will buy what you have. So you don't have to worry, like if a shipment's running behind, if, for me making soap, it's like, if I don't have all the soaps that I want done, that's okay. Because again, people don't know that. It's
Mhm.
only you that knows that, and people will
Yeah.
buy what you have in your store.
That's I think this is maybe one of the most important entrepreneur lessons that we can talk
Mhm.
about is people don't know what your grand plan is. And also they
Mhm.
don't care either.
No,
Customers don't
no.
really care. They
Mm-mm.
will buy or engage with the thing that is in front of them. And sure, they might
Mhm.
have opinions as we all do about like, oh, it would be nice to see this, or this feature would be great, or I would love it if you could carry. Like that's great. But your grand plans that you have, like
Mhm.
you're the only one who knows what they are.
Exactly.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point. Okay, can you talk to me about how you see Bosch Botanicals fitting into your average customer's daily life? Is it like the
Mhm.
thing that they do in addition to Costco? Is it something that a place that they hit a couple times a week? How do you see it in their shopping habits and their patterns? And this is grocery items essentially is the
Mhm.
category. How do you see yourself fitting into people's lives? Because if it's, as we know, if it's like a one-off store, it's great to go
Mhm.
to once, maybe twice, but if it's not integrated into somebody's weekly habit or monthly habit, that becomes hard to
Mhm.
become a staple. How do you seek to integrate yourself into your customers' habits?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So like I mentioned, we try to meet people where they are. So in terms of refills, like we would love for people to come and bring their own containers. And, when you need laundry detergent, instead of going and buying your, 5-gallon bottle of laundry detergent from Costco, come in and, purchase laundry, just refill your laundry detergent and, use that instead and realize that you don't have to buy these big, massive containers to get through your laundry. Or, like make small changes. Like, yeah, maybe I was talking to someone the other day and she was talking about, well, beeswax wraps. They just don't do it for me. I just don't like them. And it's like, that's okay. Like you don't have to go into a zero waste refill store and like suddenly throw everything out that you've got at home and stop doing all the things you've got at home. No, it's about like, okay, what are the things that are tangible for you? So if beeswax wraps don't work, well, guess what? There's silicone bowl covers or there's reusable sandwich bags. It's just about finding the things that work for you in your life. And then little by little, you come back, you refill your laundry detergent, you refill your hand soap, and then you start to see the other elements of your life that you could trade out for something that's a little bit more sustainable. Maybe it could be the vegetable bags that we carry. So instead of going to the grocery store and putting everything in those plastic bags or going to the farmer's market and putting everything in plastic bags, use the reusable vegetable bags. But it's education, it's offering enough products where people are likely to come back and refill and repurchase, but then also having those specialty things that are more like gifts. So, for example, we work with two local herbalists to supply tea. We have a lot of local artisan products in our store because working with other local artists and local makers was very important to us. That's part of our good for people, good for the planet mission is supporting local. So we carry some of those teas in bulk. So we have people coming back and just refilling their containers with locally made handcrafted teas. And those become gifts as well. So some people will come in and they'll fill it in with tea and they'll give that as a gift. Or the soaps that I make are more artisan. So they're body soaps, but they also have a beautiful design. So people will come in and give those as gifts. So it's like, what are the things that are necessary? And then what are the little nice things that are, encouraging people to give consumable gifts that won't end up in the landfill or aren't just going to get put on a shelf somewhere collecting dust.
And who would you say, or how would you describe your average customer? If there is one, there
Mhm.
might be a couple different ones, but who do you see naturally gravitating to your store?
Yeah,
You
I would
talked about a
say,
couple different parts of the community. Is that kind of the same thing, or is it a unique set of customers?
I would say we're a lot of women. We're
Okay.
definitely a women, I won't say focused business, but like women are attracted to our business more than not. And I think that that's for a lot of reasons. The design of the store is definitely, when I designed it, I built it with myself as the consumer. So, it's going to be women who are anywhere between their 20s to 60s on average, but we get a lot of men that come in too. And it's people who, I would say the core audience are people who like to shop local, like to support women owned, and are looking for ways to incorporate sustainability in their lives, but they don't have the time to do the research. So, like one person said to me, I love that you've done all the research for me and I can just come in and go, oh, okay, I know that this product is a good swap because you've spent the time going down all the rabbit holes and I don't have to. So, busy working parents working moms who are like, okay, I want to do better for my children. I want to leave the planet in a better place for them. I want to expose them to less plastic. And I know if I go in here, I can find products that are clean. For example, our laundry soap, it's by Root and Splendor, and they were just verified by the Environmental Working Group. So it's not just about having refills, it's about having products that are extremely clean and are not going to have the toxins that a lot of other products have. So those are the types of people that we're mainly bringing into the store. But then there's, the foot traffic from the mall. So people who are wandering through and are just curious. And then there's people who just, again, they were customers of ours before when we were just doing soap. And now they come back because they just love the products that we make.
Interesting. Okay. So I have two questions. One, can you talk about what are all of the things that you do to educate consumers? I mean, content marketing, probably fairs, talking to customers. What are all of the things? I mean, this falls more on marketing side. What are all the things that you do in terms of educating the community in the larger world about the steps to take towards sustainability? That's one. And the other question is, in my mind, somewhat related, but maybe it's completely different. What does your average day look like?
Yeah. Okay, those are two wonderful questions. So in terms of educating the community, number one, we do a lot of social media. So like I try to create, especially Instagram. Instagram, I've noticed, is one of the biggest drivers for customers to my store. So I try to do a good mix of educational content without making it sound preachy. I want to engage people in learning something without them feeling like they're judged or anything like that. So I try to make it funny. I try to keep it lighthearted. And then we also do a lot of media. So I try to talk to local media and talk about what it is that we're doing. And like I said, work with other partners like Clean Memphis. So if Clean Memphis is promoting a new platform for sustainability, or they're talking about zero waste and they're sharing information on their channels, I try to also push that onto my channels so that people are getting third-party information as well. I do send out a monthly newsletter, but it's usually pretty short and sweet and just, highlights what we've got going on in the store. I do speaking events. So I just had a local gardening club come into the store and I talked to them all about what's zero waste and why is the store important. And then I work in the community a lot too. So I started a garden club at our kids' school, the Snowden Garden Club. So it's kids 2nd through 5th grade. So while,
That's
I'm not like,
great.
oh yeah. So I'm not like, oh, come to the store, but it's about teaching them broader about the environment and, thinking about where does their food come from, thinking about how to grow their own food. We talk about composting, we talk about beekeeping, so it's helping educate even the youngest consumers about, better ways for sustainability. And then at art fairs, it's talking about why do we do what we do? Why do we have our products in plastic-free packaging, and what's the purpose of our store? So those are the elements that, are the ways that we're trying to get out in the community and educate the community. And then my average day. So normally start the day getting up and getting the kids out the door, getting them over to school.
How many
But
kids
then
do you have?
I have 2 kids. They're 7 and 5 currently.
Okay.
Yeah. So fun ages, but definitely a handful. So once I get to the store, I usually start by working on whatever product I need to make for, my own brand. So usually it's soap, it's bath bombs, it's shower steamers. But I try to get that going before the store opens. And then we always have a tea sample. So once it gets a little closer to opening the store, we put a tea kettle on. We start our diffuser, we write out, our board for the day saying, okay, this is the tea that we're sampling. And then we open the doors and we hope and pray that people come in. And then I do spend probably a good hour, sometimes 2 hours working on the social media content for the day, trying to get that up and running. Spend a lot of the day just talking with customers. Like I like to build a personal relationship with the people that come through the door. So trying to remember as many people's names as possible, or remembering little stories, or what they purchased last time and asking them how they like it. So that's the main focus. And then trying to find additional time throughout the day to either work on inventory, or work on catching up on the financials, or work on additional products, and then head home, pick up the kids, and try to have dinner as a family.
And are you known yet around your community as a something lady, like the sustainability lady or the refillery lady? Do you think you've earned a kind of
I'm
moniker?
Yeah, I'm definitely getting there. We were actually at an event somewhere else one day, and someone's like, "Oh, you're the soap lady." And I was like,
That's
"Yep,
nice.
that's me."
That's so nice.
Yeah.
And that's so great that you're working with kids on gardening. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely something near and dear to my heart. So we actually, I mean, we do a lot of gardening ourselves, and some of the products that I grow, I use in my products at the store. So some
Oh,
of the
that's
herbs and
cool.
flowers that I grow, I use in my soaps and bath bombs.
Oh, that's very cool. How long, just as an aside, how long did it
Yeah.
take you to get really good at making soap?
I would say it's an ongoing process. So I didn't start selling anything for almost a year. So I started making it around July or August of 2021. And then my first show was in June of 2022. So it's a long learning process. And for me, part of that is like, I'm a perfectionist. I want to make sure I'm doing it right. I want to make sure when people are using my soap that it's not going to irritate their skin or anything like that. So that's probably part of the length for me. But it's definitely ongoing education. Like I'm always trying to find, like follow people who are really good at soap making, and what are some techniques I can learn, and like what are other things that I can do to improve the products that I'm making.
So I understood from one of our previous guests who makes
Mhm.
natural soaps that
Mhm.
soaps, probably the soaps that you're making, certainly the soaps that she was making, last longer
Yeah.
than traditional over-the-counter kind of drugstore soaps. They last a
Mhm.
lot, and certainly much longer than like shower gels. So they last
Mhm.
a lot longer. And
Mhm.
she was really concerned that nobody was liking her products because they weren't buying it again and again. And so she had to do some customer research to figure out, no, it's just it lasts a lot longer. The quality is
Yeah.
much higher, but it lasts a lot longer. Do you find the same with
Yeah.
your soaps?
It is, yeah. It's definitely like you don't find people coming in once a month necessarily to restock on their soaps. It's like every couple of months, like I'll have the repeat customers come in and say, "Oh, I need more soap now." And obviously it depends on like how you use it, how you take care of it. For example, when my kids use our soap, they like to sit in the bathtub with it, and they're, playing with it in the water. So that's not going to last as long. But if you dry it out in between uses, then yeah, you're definitely going to get a longer shelf life for the soap.
So that's great that in your store you have things that are people need on a weekly basis, like on a much more
Mhm.
regular basis, plus the gifts and things like that
Mhm.
that are less frequent purchases.
Mhm.
All right, let's talk about the rest of this year. So we are in March. I cannot
Mhm.
believe that it's March. It feels like it was just
Yeah.
November. It feels like it was just Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And now we're in March, which is terrifying. What does the rest of the year look like for you?
Yeah. So we are starting to ramp back up on show season. So normally there's about two different show seasons. And for us, art shows are really important because it gives us a chance to be into the community and, talking about the products that we make and then sending people back to our store. So we have shows coming up in March, April. We don't have anything yet in May, but then you go into the summer months, and I'm actually working with a group of locally owned women businesses. We're all retail businesses. And last year when we opened, we did a passport. And so there were 14 of us, and we had a physical map with all of our businesses mapped out around Memphis, and then special deals from each of our businesses so that we could cross promote each other for the holidays. So we are actually starting that process a lot earlier this year. And we're going to be trying to get that done in the summer months. So like July, we're going to be working on that so that we can get it out earlier for people to go and know, okay, these are local women-owned businesses, encourage people to shop locally and women-owned. And then starting I have to work out probably a season ahead for all of my soaps. So
Mhm.
starting in the summer, I'm going to be working on fall soaps. starting in September, I'll be working on the Christmas soaps. So it's a lot of just planning ahead and trying to get ready for different shows and different seasons. Plus, at the mall itself, we're actually doing a second Saturday market. So we invite in local artisans and we give them a free place to pop up and sell their goods. So it's working on that in addition to, all of the other activities and shows and partnerships that we're working on.
Okay. Big challenges for this year that you see on the horizon.
Big challenges. Yeah. So I think one of the big challenges, I like to call it chicken and the egg. It's like we need to spend money on marketing and we need to have employees available at our store so we can extend our hours and be able to focus more on the things that we need to focus on, those higher level things, getting products made, getting products ordered, getting the marketing done. But it's chicken and the egg, like you need to get customers in the door so that you have the funds in order to do this, but yet you need to do the marketing and have the employees to be able to have those longer hours and get people in the door. So that's one of the biggest challenges is like trying to figure out, okay, when are the appropriate times to spend money on marketing? Or when is the appropriate time to, hold back and say, okay, we need to have a nest egg. For example, July is supposed to be a really slow month for the store, for the mall itself. So it's like, how much money do we want to have banked up just to float us through those months where it's smaller versus how much money do we want to spend up front, just really trying to push people in the door. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges is just figuring out, this is our first full year. So what are the highs and lows and how do you plan for the lows and how do you, capitalize on the highs to keep that ball rolling?
That's such a good point. This is your first trip around the sun for this
Yep.
business. So
Yep.
figuring out the patterns, shopping
Mhm.
patterns as well is,
Mhm.
oh yeah, this is a big year.
It
You'll
is.
put some
And
stakes in the ground and say, actually, June was slow and that extended to August, actually, or something
yeah,
like that. Or it was slow for the mall, but we become a staple. So that's fine. We were drawing people in.
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed that that's the scenario. All right. And then so this is pretty new. So we've got a couple questions that we ask everybody and you guys are pretty new, so these should be fresh in your mind. What do you feel like so far is your biggest success to date?
So I'm guessing you mean for the store.
Yes. Or
Yes.
personally, these two, entrepreneurial and real life happen to be very much intertwined. So one really flows into the other one.
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, being so new, one of the biggest successes was opening the door on time. And like being ready and being able to get through the first holiday season where we've never done this before. We're testing out new systems. And we're still doing art shows and juggling kids. I mean, I think it was a success just to get through that first couple of months and do it together. Still, my husband and I still are in love and
Yeah, you're still
we
married
made
and
it through without killing each other. So I think that's one of the biggest successes. But I think also once we got through that, working on finding that balance again, because from September until December, there was definitely a lack of balance. So like, the mom guilt kicks in. It's like, oh my gosh, my kids are at the store more than I want them to be, or, I don't have time to go to like these things that in the past I was able to go to for them. So, trying to find that balance and say, okay, the store is there, but it's not life. And we're getting there. I think that if we can achieve that this year, I think that'll be a big success for us. But yeah, I mean, just even opening the doors, that was a huge success.
So I'm going to deviate a little bit. This is a part B for the next question. What would you recommend for entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneur parents,
Mhm.
in finding that balance or being able to believe themselves when they tell themselves, my, store, product, site, whatever it is, service is not my whole life.
Yeah. I think it's just looking at like, so I used to work in PR years ago. I spent about a decade working in PR and somebody said something to me that has always stuck with me. And it was, is this a life and death situation? Are you a surgeon? If you can't get to this today, is somebody going to be seriously hurt or, lose their life because of it? And for my business, thankfully, the answer is no. If I have to close my store for a day because my child is sick and I definitely can't take them into the store and like there's nobody to watch them. Is that going to end the world? No. And like there are going to be days where it's going to be more of a struggle, but at the end of the day, your family is the one who is the most important. And I think it's just perspective changing. It's saying, yes, I want my business to be a success, but I can't do it without my family. So unless I invest in myself, unless I invest in my family, I can't really truly invest in my business because there's always going to be this constant push and pull and like, the mom guilt, like that takes away energy from what you're doing at your store or what you're doing at your, online shop or whatever your business is. So if you don't take the time to invest in your family and feel like I did the best I could for my family, then that mom guilt's going to take away from the energy that you have for your store. So it's, it's looking at that in a different perspective and saying, well, they always say like, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And that's literally true when it comes to your business. If you don't take care of yourself, you don't take care of, your family, then you can't take care of your business because you're always going to have this, this push and pull. And is that ever going to go away entirely? Probably not. I think that's where you also have to give yourself some grace and just say, it's not about perfection. It's just doing the best I can. And I know some days that my energy is going to be spent more on my business and some days my energy is going to be spent more on my family. But if it all, equals out in the long run, then, that's good. That's success.
Wonderful. The flip side to that first question, which was the biggest success to date, what do you think your single biggest failure, like a real failure, was to date?
Yeah. So yeah, when I think of failure, I also think of lesson learned. And I would say that, the investment that you need to make in your business is always going to be more than you think it will be. So make sure you give yourself that padding to say, okay, like this is how much I think it's going to take me to open the store. This is how much I think it's going to take me to, launch this business. But know that there's probably another 20 or 30% that you haven't accounted for because you have no idea, like you have no idea, like when you're opening your retail store, okay, this is how much I think I need to spend on product to fill the shelves, but then this is the reality. And so making sure you're prepared for that. So like, I don't think originally we were prepared for that and we were thankfully able to cover it, but it's just, going back, I think I don't know how I could have changed it because it's what you don't know that you don't know, but just accounted for more, just to say, okay, like I'm guessing this, but it's probably going to be more like this. I
Whatever
think
you're guessing, it is more than that, not only in money, but
yeah,
in time and sanity as
exactly.
well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, those being unprepared for some of those things, when you jump in, not saying that you should be scared and just say, oh, I'm not going to do it because I don't know all the things. You definitely have to have the guts to go out and say, okay, I know there's things I'm not going to face, but like those are kind of, to me, not being able to account for that or not knowing that it's, again, I don't see it as failure. It is kind of a failure, but at the same time, it's a lesson, it's a lesson learned that going forward, I would say, okay, now I know. And now I can tell other people who are starting their business, assume it's going to cost a little bit more than what you think.
And you're still around. Your business has survived that hiccup at the beginning, and what you didn't know is you've survived up until now.
Yeah, exactly. And always assume that January is going to be a slump.
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. Yes.
Yeah, between people not shopping after the holidays and we had to close for a week because of an ice storm. So,
Just there's
there's
something.
those things.
January is going to be
Mhm.
slow. All right, it's a good
Mhm.
rule of thumb. January slow. If you could get 85% of the world to adopt a single behavior, what would it be?
Yeah, so this is going to sound funny coming from a retail store, but I would have everybody take a pause before they buy something. Take that pause, whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's 10 days, 10 months, and say, number one, is this something I really want? Or is this something I need? And not that you can't buy things that you want, but when you're looking at it, say, is this something I can buy local? Because obviously buying local not only supports the local economy, it also decreases your footprint, your environmental footprint. So is it something I can buy local? I know that, we're all bombarded with those ads saying, oh, the 10 things that you can't, don't miss on Amazon because they've got this deal. And there's like this big FOMO. So we all, like we're all like, oh gosh, I have to go buy, I have to get it now because it's on sale or it's a special deal or I don't want to forget about it. But really taking that pause and saying, is it something I really want or need? Is it something that I can buy local? And then also to say what happens with it at the end of its life cycle. So, there's a lot of products out there that are promised to like, make your life easier, or you'll be so happy because you bought X, Y, or Z. But then you buy it and you realize, well, this isn't really doing what I wanted, or yeah, I'm not really happy with this. It's not really, making my life any better. So then it ends up in the landfill. And so if you stop and you think about it and say, okay, is this something where if it turns out to not be something that I like, or not be something that actually improves my life, does it have another life ahead of it? Or is it just going to end up in the landfill?
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it is funny coming from a retailer, but purposeful consumption.
Yeah, that's what we encourage. We want people to be mindful consumers. So yeah, I need you to shop with me in order for my store to stay alive, but I want you to do it mindfully and, know that these are things that you can use. And I try to carry things that you can use, or that at the end of the life cycle can be repurposed or composted.
And can you just plug your store and your products? Where can we find you in real life, on social media? What are your handles? How can we get to you?
Yeah. So for anyone in Memphis or the Memphis area, we are Memphis's first zero waste refill store, and we're located in the Chickasaw Oaks Plaza, which is on Poplar Avenue. For anybody not in Memphis, you can shop with us at www.boshi, which is BOSHI, botanicals.com. And then you can find us on Instagram at Boshi Botanicals, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Boshi Botanicals.
Nice. Becky, thank you so much for talking about your brand. It's such an interesting journey to get to where you are. And I'm so happy to talk to you as you're so new too, so we can all follow your journey as you develop through this first year of business and beyond.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amber. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Good. And for everybody else in the audience, we will see you on B1.